Express Business Edition. The Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, has finally presented 2023 budget statement. But will this document bring about the index stability to turn things around and help restore investor confidence in the economy? Well, tonight we'll be engaging the Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. John Kumah, on the budget statement that was presented today. But what has happened to government's mantra of from taxation to production? What will be the impact of the VAT rate increase going forward? Let's also look at the bit about investor interest and confidence restoration. And what would also look at government's revenue mobilization drive as well. All these issues wrapped up on PM Express Business Edition. But let's get some fine details in terms of what government has outlined in the budget that was just presented today. Now, let's look at here. We could look at revenue here, and government is projecting to mobilize about 143 billion Ghana cedis in revenue. And that is what government is trying to mobilize for next year, that is 2023. Let's look at expenditure, 205 billion Ghana cedis. That is what you're looking in terms of total expenditure for 2023. That is going to result in a deficit of 61 billion Ghana cedis. We're trying to do some analysis here about what this means for government's whole plan in trying to contain expenditure. And let's look at the deficit here and what that will mean for us going forward. So let's try and get some breakdown in terms of how government is planning to spend and even mobilize this revenue. So if you want to look at some of these numbers here, in terms of projected revenue, we're looking at grants not bringing in that much. It appears that government, because you're more of a middle income country, in terms of the mobilizing grants might be affected going forward. Now let's look at oil revenue here. We're looking at somewhere around 23 billion Ghana cedis. Let's come to non-tax revenue. We're looking at somewhere around 12.3 billion Ghana cedis. Tax revenue, and that is where all of us will be looking up to in terms of government quest to cut down on expenditure and raise more revenue. We're looking at somewhere around 99 billion Ghana cedis. That is quite interesting then. Now let's come to domestic revenue. That is 141 billion Ghana cedis. And also let's look at somewhere around the total revenue and grant is around 143 billion Ghana cedis. So that is what we are looking at in terms of the projected revenue for government when it comes to 2023. Let's come to projected expenditure. And that's also very critical because we're trying to look at how government is working to contain its rising expenditure. If you look at the projected expenditure for 2023, you're looking at arrears clearance, 14 billion Ghana cedis. Other expenditure, you're looking at 27 billion Ghana cedis. Grants to other government units, we're looking at somewhere around 30 billion Ghana cedis. Interest payments, critical for us. There is talk about borrowing, whether the government is cutting down this borrowing, and how the Ghana cedi effect is impacting on that. We're looking at somewhere around 52 billion Ghana cedis when it comes to interest payments. Now, there's talk about how we can expand the economy. And one critical area many people will be looking at has to do with the capital expenditure. You're looking at somewhere around 27 billion Ghana cedis. Goods and services, somewhere around 8 billion. Compensation, some would say that might be the biggest elephant in the room as government works to contain the wage bill. There are current negotiations going on with organized labor. Government has made some proposals, and organized labor is still trying hard to accept this proposal from government. Compensation, you're looking at 44 billion Ghana cedis, 44.9 billion Ghana cedis, and it wraps up to a total expenditure of 205 billion Ghana cedis. So by the end of 2023, this is what government is hoping to spend when it comes to its total expenditure, including arrears. Let's look at the debt stock, and another interesting area for all of us in this whole argument about debt stock. Now, we're looking at a debt stock of about 467 billion Ghana cedis. The domestic component will be around 195 billion Ghana cedis, and the external component will be 200 N71. So there's a breakdown for you in terms of the total composition of Ghana's debt stock. Let's look at the tax reviews as well. And the current proposal to increase the VAT rate, if I get it right, you're looking at somewhere around 12.5% to about 15%. And we'll be getting more detail from the Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. John Kumah, about government's whole revenue mobilization drive and what this would also mean or impact on checking inflation and also our quest to consume more as a country, how this is going to affect us. Now let's also move on here and let's come to the tax reviews. E-levy, the whole debate and controversy around E-levy and all the rest. Government has done the reduction. It's from 1.5 to 1%. Some are saying maybe it could have gone down further. So that's also get some clearer understanding from the whole E-levy thing. Let's come to the medium-term overall macroeconomic targets. At the end of the day, how is government projecting that we might end the year in terms of our projections? And it's very, very critical because the overall GDP growth, government is going to somewhere around 2.8%, and more of a marginal expectation going forward in terms of our growth. Let's look at the non-oil real GDP growth. We're looking at 3%. End of year inflation, that is very critical. Inflation is hovering around 30s currently, and you might look at this and do your own projections in terms of how we are moving going forward in terms of inflation. We're looking at somewhere around 18.9%. Now let's look at the primary balance in terms of commitment basis. You're looking at 0.7% of GDP. And let's come to the gross international reserves. Not looking at not less than 3.3 months of import cover. Let's also look at some measures that government has introduced to check the expenditure issues. It is very, very critical here as we talk about how or what government should be doing to check its expenditure. You're looking at all MDAs and SOEs are directed to reduce their fuel allocations to political appointees, heads of MDAs and also SOEs by 50%. And I'll be getting more from the minister. How would this also impact on the total government expenditure? Also look at ban on use of V8, V6 and its equivalent, except for cross-country vehicles. All government agencies using government vehicles will be registered with the GV, the green number plates, from January 2023. Also look at a limited budgetary allocation for purchase of vehicles. We'll also be getting some more details from the minister as well. Reduce of expenditure on appointment, including salary freeze, together with suspension of certain allocations like housing, utilities, and clothing. Also freeze on new tax waivers for foreign companies and also review of tax exemption. And finally, after years of debate about this whole tax exemption, finally it is going forward. And how that also impacts in terms of revenue. We're getting more details from the minister. Hiring freeze of civil servants and public servants as well. How does this whole thing play in the whole terms of Ghana's discussion with the IMF for a fund program in terms of this freeze thing? I think I'll be getting some more details on that one as well. Also, let's look at no new government agency shall be established in 2003. That is so very, very important for us. And also there shall be no hampers in 2022. So those of us, or those people will be looking for hampers from government agencies for this year, well, nothing is going to come from it because government is trying to take steps to try and cut down on cost as well. There shall be no printing of diaries, notepad, calendars, and other promotional merchandise by MDAs and NMDs and SOEs. But also, what will be the cost of all these things to government in terms of savings? Is it that significant in terms of these measures that they are undertaking? So these are some of the things that the government is trying to do for us when it comes to the measures that they are trying to look at all those things in terms of those measures that they are putting in place to try and save some money for us as a country. So we're getting more detail from the Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. John Kumah, to look at the 2023 budget. Can it bring about the expected growth, stability, and investor confidence in this economy going forward to 2023? We'll take a short break and be right back. This is PM Express Business Edition. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition. So, sometimes they'll say, Ejebo, not the fires here. 2023 budget. Finally, a tier government has outlined its economic policy for next year, how it intends to raise the required revenue, and also how it intends to spend it. Well, but one critical thing that a lot of people I know are asking is that how would this budget bring about the stability, the growth, and investor confidence in the economy? Dr. John Kumah is the Deputy Minister of Finance, and he was in the House today. I mean, whilst the presentation was going on, after that, engaging all of us in the House in terms of what we should be expecting going forward. Doc, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate it so much. It's been a rough day for you, a tough day for you, but you still made time to join us in studio to talk about a very, very, very critical thing. And how are you doing? I mean, it's a very interesting day all over. I know you want to start with the Black Stars, but I am broken. I am broken, really.
Yeah, but
I don't know whether I can even have my dinner. You know,
you should have eaten your fufu before the match.
Yeah.
Since they played around 4 p.m., you should have eaten your fufu early. But on the whole, I think it's commendable performance. And this is the first African team that has scored a goal in the Qatar 2022. And their performance generally was commendable. We disagree with a few of the goals that we conceded, but I think it's time to move on and be more optimistic. I believe we can surprise everybody in this tournament.
And government, on your part, you're going to do what government has to do to give the needed motivation to these players.
Definitely. His Excellency, the President himself, went to join them to give them the morale boost for the tournament. So it shows you the extent and commitment of government. We've given them our full support and prayers.
The minister presented the budget today. Interesting. I mean, I realized something, and I asked myself that, can we see this for the rest of the year, going into next year and even 2024? The cooperation in the chamber that they gave the minister, what happened, or what did you guys do behind the scenes?
Well, it's just glory to God for his mercies. We know the turmoil that ensued ahead of the budget, and for us to see the calm that we saw today and the unity in the House and the cordiality, I think we just thank God that we were more united today in the House.
It means this can be done. The opening statement, the pages by the Minister of Finance, and some of the words he used, thanking the minority, the help they've given him. Can we be doing this always? I mean, some would say that it tells that when the two sides work together, we can make a lot of progress in a lot of things the government wants to do.
Yes, and that is one unique feature of the Ghanaian. Anytime we are able to come together and our minds meet, we achieve better for the country. So it's a good signal that we should continue.
The interesting budget, some will say, because for a lot of people, one of the biggest takeaways has to do with the VAT rates being increased, some will say.
Okay.
And a lot of people are worried that in a time when inflation is going up, at a time when a lot of people are struggling, that might be the last thing the government to do, because they want to see government cut more rather than even sharing the burden.
Yes. There's a lot of cuttings in this budget, but obviously we also have to do aggressive revenue mobilization. And considering all the factors at the moment, VAT increment of 2.5 is the best option that we can pursue, because VAT is a refundable tax. You pay in and you can, at the end of the day, submit your transactions and even refund. So VAT is an in and out kind of tax. But of course, any increment of tax will reflect on commodity prices, among others. But in the circumstances where we are, where we need burden sharing attitude from everybody in the country to be able to walk out of this economic crunch, global economic crunch, which we are also being impacted. Obviously, we expect Ghanaians to support the government to introduce this 2.5 VAT. Of course, we countered that with a reduction in the E-levy to 1% to ease up.
Well, some would say 1.1% is still high. If you're doing
1%.
VAT up, maybe 0.05 or 0.5 would do, because we've seen how the levy has struggled, and people are angry and they voted on that by not even using the platform. Maybe if it's go down further, the argument is that you can mobilize more in revenue.
Well, it's a good argument, but if you look at all the data available and where we stand as a country, I mean, in terms of our revenue percentage to GDP, when we are doing about 12.5 and the target is to reach 15%. Sometimes you wonder how we'll be able to achieve these objectives, except to agree that as citizens, we should be able to contribute more on these taxes. I mean, nobody loves to pay tax. We know how difficult taxes are. But if we really want to achieve the economic growth and prosperity of the country that we are all looking for, then it means that we have to do more. The nations that we look up to, the Europeans and the Americans, who are doing well for their economies, if you check their tax rate to their GDP, some are doing 35%, 40%. And even in the sub-Saharan Africa, the average is around 18%. And we are still hovering around 12, 13%.
Well, no, there's a different argument that can be made for those developed economies that when these taxes are collected, I remember in Kufuor's time, there was even a situation where a project is done, they say epic benefit. They are seeing what these taxes are being used for. A lot of people are still complaining and they argue that, George, I am paying my taxes, I clear goods at the port, I do all those things, and the roads, the water, electricity, it's a big challenge. They can hardly feel the impact of these taxes that they are paying. And that is what the challenge is. So people don't mind paying taxes, but they want to feel that impact of those taxes in their area, in services, in goods and all those things. They don't feel that.
Well, I totally agree with the expectations that we want more, but it doesn't mean nothing is being done. I can tell you Ghana is one of the few countries in the world, not in Africa, in the world, where children go to school for free, not just tuition, but accommodation, books, everything that a child will need till he finishes SHS. That's a complete, massive intervention and poor program that is universal in nature. I mean, every sector that you talk about, these roles that we are talking about, I mean, even though we haven't done all roles in Ghana, but in the last 5 years, we have seen the most roles being constructed in the era of this Fourth Republic in terms of bitumen roles and feeder roles and all kinds of roles that are being done. Of course, we have not done all the roles. If you go to the health sector, hospitals, when COVID came, we saw the various interventions government did, including giving free electricity, free water, and all these things. Government is able to do these things because of the little taxes contributions that we are giving to government. So yes, we expect government to do more, and we acknowledge that we are going to do more. But we'll be able to do more when we are able to rake in more revenues, and then we can do more for the populace. Every sector of the economy, if you look at even defense and interior, in the last 4 or 5 years, look at the massive improvement in logistics, in vehicles, and all kinds of supplies that have been given. You go into education, health, roads, all kinds of sectors, and including even flagship programs that have been introduced, the agri sector, planting for food and jobs. I mean, we have seen the difficulties with cost of transport, which is increasing food prices. But we all acknowledge that food availability is there in this country. You talk about one district, one factory. In fact, there is no sector or ministry that you point to that you cannot say that something positive is going on in our country. And it's all as a result of the taxes.
Let's still come back to the E-levy issue, because there are some who also say that you have brought it down, but the exemptions have been waived or so. So robbing Peter to pay Paul. I mean, if it's brought down, and let the exemption stand.
Yes. These are what you call the scale of opportunity cost for decisions that you make. Obviously, people have complained about the high level of the E-levy, the 1.5. And it is one of the suggestions that if we can take off the 0.5 and rather look at some of the exemptions and open up the exemptions, you'll be able to even achieve more. So I don't think that people will be worse off with the exemptions. I mean, clearly, with the scenarios that we did.
So now every transaction I do, I'll be paying the tax. Now it's not. I will not be enjoying the 100 Ghana cedi fee, right?
Not at the moment. We are looking to take away the thresholds and make sure that every transaction is also routed through the common platform, so that we'll be able to get. I mean, that we didn't get the anticipated revenue for E-levy last year. And
because government didn't listen to the concerns from stakeholders, and especially the stakeholders. I mean, minority in parliament.
We didn't start with 1.5.
Yeah.
We started from 1.75. We listened and brought it down. We are still listening as we are progressing and brought it down to 1%. So this is a listening government that engages stakeholders. And over time, because governance is not easy. Every decision you make has its positive and negative impact. So sometimes the decisions are slow, but they get to be made. Everything shows that this is a listening government because we didn't start from 1%. We've come far to be where we are.
Let's come back to VAT, and I say that the rippling impact of this at a time when inflation is going. You're projecting that next year, looking at 18.6 for next year inflation. That is end of year. That is quite high, and people were expecting that the last thing the government should be doing right now is to increase the VAT rate, because the rippling impact of this on the larger economy could be very, very, very interesting.
Well, not necessarily. I've already told you the nature of VAT.
Yeah.
It's a refundable tax, so it's not necessarily going to...
The consumption tax as well?
Yes, also a consumption tax. But if you look at the overall impact, that is not what's going to cause much inflation in the economy. We know the problem with inflation, which is a bit external as well, because when COVID came, one of the symptoms of COVID recovery across the world is high inflation, because many economies were not working, there were lockdowns, and people had to survive. So there's so much liquidity everywhere. Now central banks across the world are increasing their Fed rates, and all that is bringing seeking to bring the inflation down. But of course, the other effect is the cost of borrowing and doing business in the country. So we understand the dynamics of these issues. And I strongly believe that as the world global economy improves, and we begin to see inflation slowing down in other parts of the world, especially in the US, and the Fed rate begins to go down, it will impact all other economies, and then we'll begin to see these inflationary issues coming down.
But let me get some clarity on the E-levy thing. So do I get from you that it's being fine-tuned in terms of what the exact, because normally you place regulations in
we'll do the bill.
So the exemptions has not been finalized yet in terms of how the exemptions will be done and all those things.
Yes,
and
the budget said we should do stakeholder engagement now to get the details of what we can touch and what we cannot touch. But of course, the threshold has been announced, and the minimum of 1% has been announced.
I remember when I engaged you on this the other time, and you told me about the work that has been done on this. And has the necessary work also been done on this 1%? That this time round, another year again, the minister would not come and eat humble pie and say that, gentlemen, I had a problem and all the rest. You're bringing it down to 0.5.
Well,
has the necessary work been done? Or
yes,
there's a try and error.
No, it's not a try and error.
Okay.
All the necessary works have been done. But like I said, the minister is also a Ghanaian, and anytime Ghanaians speak to him and they give him reasonable grounds to change a position, he should be able to change it. So it's not a question of eating humble pie, or it's also a question of engaging and knowing that your decisions impact people, and when they want an alternative and you can do it to their benefit, you are allowed to do so. So these things are not cast in stone, but I want to assure you that the necessary research, the necessary engagements, all the consultations that we needed to do to arrive at this decision has been.
But Honorable, I get you, the government has to raise revenue, but how do you convince Ghanaians out there that in times like this, the last thing we're looking forward to is the VAT going up by 2.5%. You hope to realize as the 2.7 billion are assigned to be educated or corrected in terms of the expected revenue. And for a traditional government that oppose VAT and semi-preco and all the rest. and in times like this, this was the last thing people were expecting from me because of the environment, the challenges. And for some Ghanaians, they'll struggle to understand this.
Yeah, so, you know, when VAT was introduced, is it 1996? I've forgotten the year.
I think so, yeah.
It was started with 17.5. And even how many years now? Almost 20-something years on, we are still talking about 15%. You get it? We opposed at the time the rate at which they started the VAT from. We never said that VAT wasn't a good idea. So let's put that in perspective. And then the increment of 2.5%, I mean, if you look at the options available, I mean, at the moment, because of this Russia-Ukraine war on fuel across the world, we cannot touch, you cannot say you are going to put any tax or levy on fuel. And so your best option is to look at how best you can still raise revenues within the difficult environment that we find ourselves. Like I said, government is not introducing these rates because we enjoy to do that. But if you look at where we are and where we must get to, it requires of us all as citizens to also burden share by agreeing to this 2.5% VAT. It is the best of all the options at the moment because
it's easier. It's
easier. Not the ease of it. No,
it's easier to do. When you place tax on petroleum, when you do VAT, you can go and sleep and the money comes. Some are saying that we should still expand the tax net in terms of expanding the tax net and even looking at collections and all the rest. So there are a lot of people out there, Honorable, who are not paying taxes, but they are still in a lot of economic activities. What is GRA doing to make sure that we get the money they're supposed to get?
Yes, I agree with you. And the revenue measures that we announced is not only VAT that we're talking about. We're also talking about the immediate implementation of the property rates tax.
Is it being refined? Because we already have a property rate that we pay. So going forward, how is it going to be? Just help me get some clarity on that one. Right. So what would be, quote, the new property rate tax thing that you are so sure that you will get the required revenue to hit that 1.4 something billion Ghana cedis in terms of revenue? Yeah.
So now government is introducing technology in the collection of the property tax rate. And now GRA and, of course, the private sector support are working with the various district assemblies in Ghana. You know, a lot of work has gone into it. The Ghana Statistical Service has already done the census and identified about 8.5 million houses across the country. So now we know the number of houses. We needed a technology that could assist us to do proper location and identification of these houses. And then the evaluation, the assessment of the cost. Because if you haven't done evaluation of the house, of the property, how do you charge it? So all these things needed to be done. Of course, with support from the Ministry of Local Government, all these stakeholders have come together and all the groundwork has been done. We strongly believe that because of the technology that will assist in the identification and delivery of this property tax rate, we are going to see high increment and enforcement of that rate. So it's taken a while, but at least in 2023, we are going to begin to see results with the property tax rate. Of course, 70% of all the revenues from that property tax will go to the district assemblies, and then the rest will go to GRA and part to central government. So definitely, we are very confident that this time it will be different because of the arrangements we have done and the background studies and research that has been done in terms of identification and proper evaluation of the properties.
One critical thing I also wanted to look at, and as you're still scoping the area of revenue and taxes, is the the tax exemptions. And finally, we are making some progress on that one.
Exactly.
I don't know in terms of, I was still going through the budget, so forgive me that. Have we done some extrapolations in terms of what we are looking to get from it, or this time it's going to be implemented well? Because so that we can get the revenue from that area as well.
Yes, you know, the Tax Exemption Act has been passed now, and that means that a lot of tax exemptions that were given to foreign corporations, mostly, of course, there were local companies that also enjoyed tax exemptions, but mostly foreign companies that come into our country to execute projects get to enjoy the tax exemption. Now the Act has taken away that option. And in fact, there are rough estimates. Of course, we didn't put specific to this budget, but people have suggested that annually we give over $1 billion or $2 billion in tax exemptions. Now, the difficulty with this tax exemptions situation is that sometimes the commercial agreements that we sign to bring in these export credit facilities and capital investment in your country sometimes require you to put a stake, okay, into the project. And usually in those agreements, government will opt to take the tax component as their contribution to this project. So now if you are taking those opportunities away, then you are saying that, yes, you come in, but we are also going to pay our portion. So, but in the end, if you look at the mathematics of it, government will still gain from this current arrangement that were before.
Interesting, and therefore you're going to ensure that it's implemented well,
yes,
to get the required revenue. Because some are saying that with the issue about taxes and revenue, a little more scrutiny, a little more work, you might get even more than you're looking for, so that the rate will not be hiked. I mean, some will say that the VAT, the real rate you are paying, could be now 21% because of NHIS and all those things that are being factored into it, and that is huge. That would increase the cost of prices of goods and services on the market.
Yes, we don't doubt that. I mean, there's no way you introduce a tax that it will not have impact. But we have said that if you look at the generality of the impact compared to other options, because where we are, we need necessarily to raise revenues for the country. Yes, we are looking at the expansion of the net, a lot of tax compliance issues, and then also in this budget, we talked about building local capacity for export. And so even the benchmark discount policy to this time, we want to now remove all the benchmarks.
Oh, interesting. I mean, yes, we got Gutta is going to fight you guys, because they think that, listen, there will be a rippling impact on that, on goods that are imported and all the rest. So finally, you've taken the decision to scrap.
Take away the benchmark discount policy fully in the 2020.
And it's taken off in January, because when the preparation is it,
it's passed. So
sorry, Honorable, you've been into Parliament and all the rest. I mean, all other things being equal, when are you hoping that you get the appropriation for this budget? So that you start everything in terms of those policy measures that we announced and that could take off.
And from the calendar from Parliament that I've seen, maybe by 21st, we should do that before Parliament rises.
Okay.
Which will be about 22nd of December. I believe that by that time we should have.
Are you going to get the required consensus, just like what you did to get this presentation done? Because already some members in the minority are raising issues with the VAT, and all those things. So are you sure that you get the required numbers to get this appropriation done?
Yes, we hope so. At the end of the day, of course, Ghana has already suffered a lot with parliamentary disagreements, especially over E-levy last year, and the consequential downgrading of the economy, among so many things that has brought us where we are. We can only plead with our friends on the minority side to understand that we are not in normal times, and the only way that we can come out of this difficult economic situation is when we work together. Like when we started with that discussion, that anytime we work together as a country, we put away our partisanship aside, we achieve a lot for the country. Yes, these are difficult times, but we will need their cooperation to be able to pass these measures and several other measures that we have talked about in this budget. At the end of the day, when we have to pay workers in the country, we don't look out for NPP workers and NDC workers. All workers have their political affiliations, and we have to take care of them. If we don't pass the appropriation with these measures, what is going to happen to compensation and wages and salaries from January?
But you are still negotiating with organized labor, right, to get something done on them. I mean,
yes.
How do you factor that in whilst you've also laid this paper before Parliament?
Yes, I think that negotiation has been concluded.
As we speak right now?
As we speak,
I see.
As far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
I don't know if there are more issues. But of course, we all know, I mean, you put the figures there. If you look at all the revenues coming in the year, and how much is going into compensation alone, which is what, 52 billion. And debt service alone was 44 billion. So how much more can you do? So even though we know it may not fully reflect the difficult economic situation for labor and workers, they must also understand that there's a limit to which government can respond to what they are deserving of. And this is there's always the foundation of the discussions when it comes to labor demands and what government can do. It is always subject to availability of resources. We have shown the numbers, and it is today the biggest component of all government obligations in our total expenditure. And so we'll continue to engage and explain the situation. Of course, they will always say we should burden share. Government has announced a number of measures to also cut down on government appointees, the use of V8 and V6 in town. It's only now allow for cross-country inspections, among other things. We are cutting down on fuel, coupons and allowances, even rent support to public appointees, and so many interventions. And also, of course, a cap on salary adjustment for SOEs. So we are not only talking about political appointees, but also the SOEs, the general government situation, and among other things. So we believe that a number of everybody, as far as this budget is concerned, everybody is required to give up something. And we expect the minority to also cooperate.
But Honorable, some will say that these cuts, I mean, if we can even quantify it or even work out the GDP component of it, some are saying that they are not that significant in terms of its impact on the final expenditure items. That this might not even do, I stand to be educated, more than 2% of GDP or even 1% of GDP. And that still doesn't show the real commitment of government to share burden in these times. Fuel coupons might be 0.1% of GDP. These cuts are not that significant that would impact on the total expenditure line of government.
Yes, but it is said that little drops of water makes a mighty ocean.
But this drop is so insignificant.
Yes, but unfortunately for you and I and all Ghanaians, the major expenditure items are so rigid, backed by law and governance protocols that you can't touch. This one of it is compensation that we are talking about. 52 billion, how do you cut that? In fact, there's demand for even more.
By cleaning out the ghost names as well.
Oh, that is always being done. Of
some
course,
will make, and I know that is the prerogative of the president, but some will also say that, listen, the number of ministers, if that is also reduced as well, that would impact on the wage bill.
Exactly.
And those who retire on these salaries as well, when the numbers are cut down, that would also impact on the wage bill.
I agree with that. And all those interventions are continuing. They are being done every day. Ghost names are being identified and taken out. Of course, government has reduced its ministers from 120 ministers to 85. Still, people want to see more. And maybe over time, President, His Excellency, may want to review that if he thinks it's also something to look at. And several other things. You just heard that we are placing moratorium on public recruitments, new public sector.
Has that got to do with the IMF negotiations that you're doing?
It's all part of it. At the end of the day, where we are necessarily have to go for a fund program, and not even beyond the fund program. They say that when you are in a deep hole and you want to come out, the first thing you do is to stop digging. We ourselves have to know that we have to do something to improve on our economic circumstances. And that's exactly where we are. We are cutting a lot of expenditures and reviewing a number of interventions from government. And we believe that at the end of the day, government is also showing commitment in terms of what it can also do to respond to these difficult times. And we expect all Ghanaians to
And since you spoke about the IMF, I think that we'll be asking that. So as we speak right now, first I want to get some clarity from you on the status of the negotiations as we speak right now. Okay. And then some would also argue that they didn't see much of the fund program or a fund negotiations in the budget, even though it's your program, it's your economic program, it's your COVID-19 recovery economic program. We wanted to see some measures in terms of a fiscal consolidation and all those things being so clear in the budget. They didn't see that. That doesn't mean that we could have, my layman terms, another budget again when this agreement is all finalized. But let me first get from you the status of the discussions, trying to get a staff level agreement before the end of this year, and all those things as we speak right now. Can you fill us in on that one, Honorable?
Okay. So, of course, this budget has been done in close collaboration with the fund, because you know that we have started engagement for a while, and we are even hoping that by the end of the year we can arrive at the staff level agreement. The necessary directions on what we can do to restore fiscal responsibility, and then also to bring down the debt, and what we can do in terms of our revenue measures and our fiscal expenditures. All these measures have been agreed upon with the fund before they were reflected in the budget. So it's not like we did this budget outside the arrangements with the fund. I can tell you that for every measure or step that we have taken, it's been checked or discussed as far as the fund program is concerned. So I don't know what exactly you wanted to see, but this budget...
I won't call this budget an austere one.
You won't call it austere one?
I won't call it an austere one. I'm sorry, you're making a point. Just go ahead.
Yes, but you see, it is so because if you look at the deficit figure that we announced in this budget of about 62 billion, it is so because we have not reflected the outcome of the debt operations that we want to do. And it is still at early stages.
And I want to get, it's good you've mentioned, because I was learning some new words today, and earlier on you were talking about something or other, to get that clarity from you about that debt operations and all the rest. And so what do you mean, or what is government saying, that there will be a cut on domestic papers and all the rest? I want some clarity, because I also heard something in Parliament today doing the arguments that were going on when the live coverage was going on, and I asked myself, oh, really? Let me get some clarity from you, since you're here on that one.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I need to clarify what I said in the morning about the debt operations called the debt exchange program. This is a program that is yet to be launched.
Yeah.
And so government is committed to an amicable and orderly arrangement as far as bond investors and all the investors are concerned. And no conclusions have been made yet as to what percentages. All the discussions has been scenarios and examples and speculation.
So if I get you right, what you were saying earlier this afternoon, what was it got to do with proposals on the table?
Various not on the table, like explaining what the debt exchange program was all about. It was not speaking in specific to what is going to be done. So I just want to put that clarity out that no decisions have been made. Government is committed to an orderly and amicable process to engage all the parties. You can't announce any percentage when you have not even engaged the parties. But in order to let people understand what the debt exchange program was about, we went into examples, and that is creating a different impression out there.
Interesting. So as we speak right now, no agreement has been reached. Government hasn't put anything on the table in terms of how those debt restructuring could be done.
Yes.
That could result in some haircuts and all the rest.
At all. No conclusions, no agreements. But government has announced the program that it will launch it very soon. So that is what we are waiting for.
Interesting.
I just want to take opportunity to clarify.
So, for those who were worried that I had some bond papers with the banks, I'm going to get some haircuts and all the rest, that is still early days yet? Or something is going to happen? Because I remember people said that we are not going to the fund for a program, and there was a program. I mean, there are some people who, anytime government speaks, they still want to hold that with a pinch of salt. Now you're clarifying to us that there hasn't been any conclusion on this. Can I hold you by your word, Honorable?
In fact, that is the situation, and government is going to launch it. The government only announced the program called the Debt Exchange Program. And let's stick to what the budget has announced. In the right time, the ministry and all the stakeholders, and even with the fund, do the announcement on how it is going to go. Of course, you should remember that we have domestic and external partners that we have to fully engage. It is the outcome of that engagement that will result in specifics. We are not there yet.
What would you tell those who also say that in all these things, they don't see government taking a chunk of whatever that will happen, maybe sometimes even absorbing whatever shocks and all those things, that if I have any money anywhere or even all those things, I don't see or feel that total burden sharing the government is talking about. Everything is being pushed on consumers, taxes are being brought on, there are discussions about debt exchange and all the rest, and these are things that are still scenarios. You know, people don't get the sense that Dr. John Kumah is saying that because of this, Honorable Senior Minister, I want to take a 50% cut, even at their own. They are not seeing that, and that's why people are sometimes, they are mad, they are angry with government that we don't see that government, because like banking sector cleanup and all the rest, you know, and that is not being seen.
Well, government, especially in 2022, announced 30% cut in salaries of political appointees. Of course, fuel coupons, and like I said, rent allowances and all those things are being withdrawn even from the 2023 budget. So there's a lot of sacrifices that government is making. But of course, if people want to see more, they're entitled to that. But
isn't that the reality, Honorable? Because some are saying that, for instance, banking sector cleanup or whatever finality that you reach on this debt exchange program and all the rest, I want to see government take a chunk of whatever it will be.
But the government sector cleanup, government spent 25 billion.
Yeah. How much cost?
Depositors.
Yeah. How much cost is government taking on that? Because someone was blaming that the indecision of regulators has caused that.
Yes.
Why should I suffer for the indecision of a regulator in the space?
I
want that regulator even to take a pay cut on that one. So some are saying that these are the things people want to see.
Yes.
In these times.
Yes. And also don't forget that people are facing trial as a result of...
But the money has still not been recovered.
Of course, there's a receiver working on that. I don't know how much has been recovered, but some monies are being recovered. I don't know how much of it, but these are objective questions to raise. What is happening and what can be done to improve on the situations. But the assurance is that government is committed to addressing those concerns, and government is showing by leadership that they are cutting what they are also entitled to in these difficult times, and making sure that we are bringing down the cost of governance.
I see. Interesting. So with all these things, at least by the end of December, we'll get a fair idea about this. So debt exchange program and all the rest.
Yes, the details will come.
So what are you telling investment houses out there and all the firms who are worried about some of these scenarios that have been put out there?
Yes, to assure them that there's no cause for concern, and government is determined to engage them in an orderly and amicable manner to reach the conclusions that will serve all parties' interests. And as we speak today, there are no conclusions. And so nobody should be worried. Government has only announced its intentions on the program. It is going to be formally launched, and then the formal engagement will happen until conclusions are reached.
There's a bit about stabilizing the economy and restoring investor confidence.
Yep.
Are you that optimistic going through the policy statement and that you've outlined that this document can do that trick for you? Because are you that optimistic?
Very, very, very optimistic. This is the kind of budget we need at this time that will seek to address the problems and concerns that everybody have. That how can we come out of this difficult economic situation? And this budget addresses that. I mean, we know that the number one problem is how we can bring our debt to sustainable level and ensure fiscal consolidation and all that. And then also, we are also expecting to have a fund program that will intervene and all that. But you see, we know that 2022 brought a lot of hardships, and the poor are even suffering the more. So if you look at this budget, in 2023, we are seeking to do more social protection programs. The leap is going to go up for beneficiaries and also the amount that they receive at the end of the month. And then also school feeding program in terms of the payment. They are also going to see an increment in the caterers' cost or prices. And then, of course, regular payments on time to improve on the situation, because you need these things to address the very poor in society and give them safety nets. And so even though we are seeking to cut down costs, government is also mindful of interventions that will help the poor people.
Honorable, in 10 seconds, your final words to Ghanaians, 2023 budget.
Well, my final words to Ghanaians is that we should support government. Government acknowledges that we must lead by example. And so in this budget, we have shown how government is also going to give up a lot of opportunities. We as citizens must also understand that we have a role to play, and let's continue to work together to build this country.
Well, I know the debate will still go on. We'll be looking for the debate in Parliament and get and find details as you put in place the necessary regulations in Parliament with respect to the policy measures that you outlined in the budget. We'll still be following the IMF discussions, and we'll also be looking forward to that debt exchange program launch that government will be launching. This is PM Express Business Edition. Expect more in terms of more clarity and fine details and scrutiny on the 2023 budget put forward today in Parliament by the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta. My name is George Wiafe. Have a great day.